Welcome to the Film Experience discussion on the possible Emmy nominations to come. And I'm going to turn it right over to Abe Fried-Cantor, who is our resident guru on all things Emmy. And I'm more of a film person, as you can see. So I turn it over to you for television.
Thank you, Nathaniel. I'm thrilled to be here with all of our guests. I'll have everyone introduce themselves as they speak. But I'm curious, how are we feeling? We're, about a week and a half away from nominations. Do we think this is going to be a year of a lot of freshness because of so many open slots? Or are we going to get a lot of things that we haven't thought about in years and didn't want to think about again?
How about a little of both? Hi, everyone. I'm Chris James. And it's going to be a very interesting year. I think it's going to be kind of a little of both of what you said, Abe. I think we're going to get, especially on the comedy side, a pretty clean slate. But I think, especially on drama, things are just going to probably go to the main 8 shows that get up there for series. I think there's going to be maybe a lot of hive mind just based on what people have watched. I think another thing that I didn't quite catch until a couple weeks ago that's going to complicate things is there were less submissions this year. So a lot of categories now will have less slots than past years. So the main lead actor in comedy and lead actress in comedy are now down to 5. The comedy supporting races are down to 7. So it's getting tighter and tighter.
I was also going to say a little from column A, a little from column B. I think something will come roaring back. I know, Carlos, you hope it's The Handmaid's Tale.
What? What? I don't know what to talk about. What?
But I do think something that has been fading will come, and I'm wondering if it might be This Is Us, because do people still is the television industry still watching that? We'll find out when the nominations come, because I could see that easily coming back with a vengeance. Or we might have fresh slates, as you said.
Hi, I'm Claudio, and I think in some capacity, it's always safe to expect more of the same from the Emmys, but as you've pointed out, there are, especially in the comedy categories, they need to present fresh batches this year, if only because there is no other choice. So that will be interesting to see what rises to the top.
Yeah, I'm Carlos. Hi. Limited series is just always the most star-studded category at this point. But with I'm interested with how drama and comedy would kind of like go in different ways, because I think in comedy, the front runners are first season shows, while in drama, the one that's probably gonna win and the other possible options are already running. The front runner is in its 4th season. So I think that difference on the trend that we're gonna see in the drama and comedy, that's interesting. And also the lesser submissions. So what could get in? There's a lot of playfulness in the 5th, 6th slot this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's also I feel like last year in comedy series, we got a bunch of new nominees that were mostly not freshmen. And that was interesting to see how these shows sort of, took a little bit longer to get into. I think Cobra Kai and Mythic Quest are 2 options for this year that are not new shows, but that some people are expecting. I've actually never seen either of them. I don't know how I try to watch every pilot, but those are 2 I have no familiarity whatsoever with, but I will dive right into. Same thing with The Boys, which I watched the pilot and nothing more, that if that gets nominated, that will take up a lot of my time. But the big thing I think we have this year is we have a lot of shows that could dominate all the acting categories. The Handmaid's Tale is one. It's done it already, but it could do it again. Ted Lasso is probably the biggest, which I think we're probably all happy about, but it's still going to hog a lot of slots. I think The Flight Attendant sort of could go either way, that there could be a number of supporting nominations, or it could be not that many, just because that didn't happen in all the mid-year precursors, not that it usually would. But I'm curious what shows that we think, or most people seem to think, are going to do well, are we overestimating?
I'm just going to hop in here, right, and say WandaVision. I liked it personally, but the internet is not the Academy, and that's true for both movies and television. And that's just such an online obsession that it strikes me that it might not be an industry obsession. And we'll see. I mean, it could be, because sometimes the two things do align, but they don't align all the time, especially with genre shows. So, like, I feel like a lot of people are expecting Elizabeth Olsen to show up, but I'm doubtful, personally. Even though I think she's very good in the show, I just think her competition is so stiff, and then they're more in traditionally dramatic performances. And I would be surprised to see it actually land in series. I think it'll get nominations here and there. I just think people are overestimating.
I think kind of to your point, Nathaniel, even though I wouldn't say WandaVision specifically, I think limited series is chock full of a lot of competitors that you could see sort of either getting like 10 nominations or 2. I think some other ones that are like that are the Underground Railroad is like very ambitious and really grand, but it's also a lot to watch. I could see that either just getting everything or very little. I could see the same happening for The Undoing. It had a bunch of precursor support, but then has sort of dwindled off. And I think Mare of Easttown stole a lot of its thunder as sort of the soapy mystery drama. I think even too, Small Axe continues to be a really big question mark. It either hits in a big way or maybe it's just John Boyega. So I think the limited series is where I think everyone's kind of putting their trust in a different front runner that's not Mare of Easttown or Queen's Gambit.
Following what you said, Chris, I also think Small Axe may be going to be a disappointment at the Emmys. I think John Boyega is pretty much locked, but the rest of it, I could imagine just getting that nomination and nothing else, which I would be very sad about, but not to relitigate this eternal conversation, is it film or TV? I think part of what will probably make it, at least in my opinion, a tough sell for Emmys is that it doesn't really feel like prestige TV in a way that a lot of the other shows that people are expecting to do well feel, especially something as plotless as Lovers Rock. Really, I don't find any correlation to something like that in Emmy's recent history. So I'm really afraid it's going to do very bad on Emmy nomination morning.
That's an interesting wrinkle with the Emmys this year, is even though they keep changing their category names and they keep tinkering with the rules as television keeps evolving, you've still got this really weird thing happening with not knowing how to define things like anthology versus continuing series versus anthologies that are singular standalone episodes, that versus anthologies that just change season by season. So even if you change the categories to just be anthologies, it would still be a mess, really. You would still have it, would still feel like some things were competing as movies and other things as continuing series.
Yeah.
Of how to solve that, or even if it's solvable.
It's definitely hard to solve, but I think the one thing that's at least nice is I love poring over the big long ballots. I'm at least like, whatever distinction you want to make, someone at least made it so I can Apple find where what you're classifying Small Axe is, so I can make sure to give it my vote.
Yeah. All right. So I love Ted Lasso, but I'm not sure if it's gonna blow up that big in the acting categories. It could easily be, I mean, it's still the front runner, but I could also see it just Jason and Hannah and one supporting actor. I'm not sure if it would go big. I mean, I think usually, or correct me if I'm wrong, usually the shows that just eat up the acting categories usually happen in their second season when there's more love already established for a show. But I don't know, it could go big or it could go, oh, it's just Jason Sudeikis and Hannah Waddingham, okay. That, and I have a gut feeling that I May Destroy You could go big, or could be that limited series that gets writing and directing but not series. I don't know.
Like Normal People last year, which
Ouch.
is a big favorite of ours at the Film Experience. I would say a few things too. The point before about what things are. The biggest thing that I find is the idea of the performance categories. That someone like John Boyega is unquestionably a lead in his standalone film, and then you have all these people from Solos and Soulmates and all these other things that are anthology series where they are the lead actors or actresses in one episode. And so, to me, what you classify things as doesn't matter as much as where the performances go. That if someone is a lead in one episode, and I think there was one year, I want to say back in like 1990, where they like combined the guest actor and lead actor categories, and I think it was a mess. But it's an interesting idea of what is just a performance. I think we've seen that with other awards organizations doing that, and I think it just leads to more of a mess. And each category having different numbers of nominations is already a lot to keep track of. I don't want to go that far, but the other thing is, in terms of the shows that I think we may be overestimating, one is Lovecraft Country, which did really great, I think, with the Critics' Choice Awards, and then got only the top nomination from the Golden Globes and SAG. And while this is, in many ways a different group of people, I still think that that's really a genre show, and it has excellent performer options in every single category, but it's easily possible that none of them can get in. And on the flip side, my counterpoint to both WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier doing poorly is that The Mandalorian really did very well last year, when I don't think it should have. I like season 2 better, but even so, it's not among the best of the series to me that are on the air. And honestly, I wouldn't mind it not being in the major categories, but I want all these guest stars like Katie Sackhoff and Timothy Olyphant. Like I want all guest acting nominations for The Mandalorian, and I think I'm alone in that, because it's going to be technical nominations and series, maybe Pedro Pascal. But I think one of the most enjoyable parts of this pre-nominations process that inevitably is met with disappointment once nominations are announced is rooting for some of our underdog shows. And I think there's two categories to that. One is the things that we would love to see nominated that we know never would, like Alan Tudyk for Resident Alien. It's not going to happen, but how amazing would that be? And then shows that theoretically should be Emmy-friendly, like Dickinson or Shrill, that should be noticed and have, powerful streaming services behind them. But I'm curious from all of you, what are some of those shows, let's say the realistic, distant dark horses that you're rooting for?
Well, I don't.
Realistic.
You can be unrealistic too. That's fine. We can say both.
I don't know how realistic or unrealistic it is, but I'd really like to see Superstore get something. Now that it's over, there will be no other opportunity to reward it in the future. Just anything. I don't think it's been nominated for anything, is it?
I'm not sure. But Schitt's Creek did it last year, so you never know. These late last-minute searches are possible. I don't know that Superstore has the fan base as Schitt's Creek, but if ever a show did, maybe it is Superstore.
In the last seasons, the Americans kind of had that trajectory, and Friday Night Lights even had that trajectory, but it's not that common. The thing that I think is not unrealistic, but it's a new series that I thought was great, but I never heard anybody talking about it, was The Nevers on HBO. And usually HBO can generate a lot of buzz for their shows, and I thought that was just strong across the board. The performances, it's also a genre show, but the Emmys are more friendly to genre than the Oscars. So I thought, the first couple episodes, I'm like, wow, this is going to be a big deal. And then I just never heard anybody speak of it. So I'm feeling like I'm the only fan of it out there.
Speaking of shows, I feel alone on the internet talking about a friend made the recommendation for me to watch 911 Lone Star, which I was like, why in the world am I going to be watching a campy Fox show? And it turned out to be one of my favorite binges of the past year. It's so fun. It's got a really incredible cast, and I don't know, I feel like I've been disappointed by most of the drama series kind of front runners aside from like the few things that have kind of been unquestionably great. And I just wish that they'd embrace the good people of the 126 in Austin.
This could be the comeback of the procedural, right? I think that's something that may happen with Mom or other shows, that have been on for a while and haven't really embraced. I also think an interesting piece of Emmy statistics is Rob Lowe always submits as lead actor, no matter what show he's in. And if he's actually a lead, he used to submit as lead for Brothers and Sisters, for Parks and Recreation. He was the only one besides Martin Sheen at the beginning who was submitting for The West Wing and lead. And I think I would argue he's probably the lead for sure in 911 Lone Star?
He is, but you know what? I love someone who just will defiantly continue to go and lead. You go, Rob Lowe. But I think like my
Very
more
old Hollywood of him. I love it.
it very much is.
Supporting
But yeah, on like more realistic ones, I thought Pen 15 was the best show this past year. I hope it. I think it will get into comedy series, but I hope it can really just go all the way down with like acting nominations and such. Second year, Love of Dickinson. I hope that does well. Search Party is great, and I also think like Hacks is getting so much love for Gene Smart, but I'd love if the whole supporting cast. I'd love if that was our big show that really just showed up in every category.
Carlos?
I'm still catching up on more television, but I am kind of nervous on how I just watched it 30 minutes ago. How will the flight attendant go? Because I think we're kind of observing the awards run last season, coinciding with the Oscars, and I think it got stuck in between Schitt's Creek and Ted Lasso last year, and then now it's stuck between Ted Lasso and late surging Hacks. So I don't know if the flight attendant would be. I think it's the unthreatening third at this point in comedy series. I'm curious how far it would go outside of Kaylee Cuoco, because I think that cast is strong. It's really strong. Oh my gosh, but I'm really just curious because I think with what we've seen last year, for example, at the Emmys, with their front runners, they just go big on their front runners and damn the rest, basically. So more, for example, like well, this is in drama. For example, last year, only 3 of the drama series got directing nominations, 2 each. And then the other 2 directing nominations were for non-nominated series. So I'm not sure if Ted Lasso and Hacks would be the thing that would just blow up and eat up the categories, or I'm really curious to see where the flight attendant would land. Because, for example, like you got Rosie Perez, you got Josiah Mamet, and then I don't know where Michael Weissman is gonna place, because anyway. But yeah, the flight attendant. I'm really curious on how it's gonna land outside of Kelly Cuoco in series.
I do think you bring up a good point about directing and writing. I haven't had a chance to pour over those ballots because that's always a very exhaustive process. But I noticed historically some shows like Better Call Saul submitted like 9 or 10 episodes every year in both those categories and still managed to get a couple nominations the past few years, which is really interesting, especially given the snub of almost all the actors last year. Whereas like The Crown always submits exactly 1 episode, and other things like Louis used to do that too. And it's an interesting strategy. And I know that's where Pen 15 showed up last year, which is why those who love that show are clinging to hope that it could do better this time around. And we do see that sometimes, because even the Americans used to get annual nominations. I mean, Battlestar Galactica used to get nominations too in there, and that never led to anything, unfortunately, bigger than that. But it is interesting, something like This Is Us that's never received a single directing or writing nomination, even though the storytelling on that show is actually one of the major aspects of it. And I think it's weird to call This Is Us an underdog, but somehow it's become that, in that it has this really great cast. Justin Hartley, to me, is somebody who I think should have been nominated. He's the only member of the adult, 5 Pearson family members who's never been nominated. I'm glad he's in supporting this time. I also think that Pose is unfortunately an underdog. I know that some people have mixed feelings about season 3, but this cast, I mean, it's never gotten as much attention as I think it should have. And if we're going to get on the Ryan Murphy train, I'll go on what I know is a solo path here and push for Ratched. which I like a lot and think is really terrific. I know Golden Globe voters agree with me, and that's not the company I'm trying to keep. But I think that's a great show, and I would really love to see a lot of the cast nominated. I don't know what to expect because I think there was, in a sense, a stronger love for Hollywood last year than I would have thought, even though it missed out on the top category, because it still got some acting nominations like Holland Taylor and Jeremy Pope that weren't, a given. And I guess 911 Lone Star is also, right, a Ryan Murphy thing, even though it's not, it doesn't look like one, right? So well, I just not sure what to expect. Sorry, Nathaniel.
Well, then he also has Halston this year, which is hard for me to read because like, that's one of those things where the internet has decided it's bad, which, you know, is fine because like I'm not devoted to Ryan Murphy. I think a lot of his shows are bad. I didn't understand why that one got the ire of the internet so much because I thought it was just basically a Ryan Murphy show. They're all kind of, they all have like epic highs and really, really, they're all very uneven, all of his shows, even the best ones. But it seems like people really don't think Halston's gonna perform well, but I'm not so sure. Like, I don't know why people are convinced that it's not going to perform well, but it seems to me like it would be an easy get for a couple acting nominations, at least. But I could be wrong.
I would say the only highs and lows in Halston were Ian McGregor's energy levels and drug intake levels. But no, but I think you actually do bring up a good point. Like even something like, I think it's fair to say Hollywood was pretty widely maligned, and yet it still managed to get some nominations. I think what he has in his favor is people watch, or at least voters seem to watch Ryan Murphy shows, or at least like the Ryan Murphy prestige shows.
Yeah.
And I kind of wrote about this too. I'm not predicting him, but you know, the lead actor in the limited series category is much weaker than the lead actress category, and Ian McGregor is like very much like swinging for the fences. Like you can see all the acting going on. I think if people are watching it and maybe not watching like the Bevy or Showtime shows like Your Honor or the Comey Rule or all these other things, I think it's very, very reasonable that Ian McGregor can get in.
Yeah, that category is very strange to me because it also has like someone who seems like the default frontrunner, even though I can't imagine people are that excited about it, with Hugh Grant in The Undoing. And I would argue that he's bad in that show, even though I'm a huge fan of his, and I think he should have some Oscar nominations under his belt and all that. I just thought he was quite bad in that show, but these things happen, and the show was very popular, so we'll see if it can hang on to its popularity from the winter now that we're in summer, though.
Right. We also did see Big Little Lies last year, which does not seem like last year. It seems like a lot longer than that ago. But basically that it did well with Golden Globes and Screen Actors Guild, hit the top awards for both of those, and then missed out for the Emmys. And so it's possible The Undoing could go that way. But my real question is, The Queen's Gambit was like sweeping everything. That and Ted Lasso were just taking everything mid-year. And then this show came along called Mayor of Easttown. And I think in a lot of ways, The Queen's Gambit is much more accessible because it's about chess, and that's fun, and that's great. Mare of Easttown is pretty bleak. There's a lot of humor in there, but I'm curious whether that's a case of the internet overrepresenting the love for Mare of Easttown, or if The Queen's Gambit really could be, overtaken by something that came more recently.
I think it definitely could. I think there's the internet. Internet is an echo chamber, so I think keeping that in mind is like always good. But there was just a way that week by week, Mayor of Easttown commanded water cooler conversation in a way that like Queen's Gambit was just like one big dump of the episodes, and like everyone sort of caught up and watched it. I think a lot of people like really got caught up in the mystery of Mayor of Easttown. Like people like my parents and stuff who aren't on the internet or engaging in forums, or like my friends who are deeply not online, all watch Mayor kind of became this like mystery people wanted to unravel. And I think that helped get people through what might have been some of the more gruesome moments, because it is, the pitch is easy. Kate Winslet puts on a funny accent and solves a murder. It kind of sells itself and doesn't feel like there's a huge barrier to entry to it. It's like a cereal.
And I mean, it's interesting to me because a category I think we tried to talk about a little last year was TV movie, one that many wonder, why does it still exist? But interestingly, and I just looked this up to double check, there were actually more TV movies submitted this year than limited series, which doesn't feel right. It's only by a few. But what's interesting is continually the things like Sylvie's Love and Uncle Frank, which started at Sundance, and then all of a sudden, once Amazon got them, they were no longer movies. And I mean, Sylvie's Love particularly, that's a film that's I really liked that one, and I think that's great. We have a comment from Claudio or Carlos about this.
No, let's go with Claudio. I love this category. It's so weird, but go Claudio.
No, I'm really hoping Sylvie's Love does well because I really liked it. I was just laughing again at the arbitrariness of what is TV, what is movies, depending on who buys it. Sorry.
It's true.
I think the easiest solution for this, probably not a popular thing, is to just leave movies, even if they're on television, since everything is on television now, for the Oscars, and anything that's ongoing is TV.
I agree with that.
The easiest thing, like just all TV movies are movies now because streaming is like the middle ground. Because it does seem strange. Like I was working on my list or my halfway mark, because we're halfway through the year, of like favorites in each movie category, and I was putting Unpregnant on a lot of things, only to discover that it's on the Emmy ballots because it came out right at the end of the period, and I had no idea it was considered a TV movie because HBO Max and the other things on HBO Max are for the Oscars. So
Let them all talk.
So.
Yeah, I encountered a similar thing because last year, like I liked An American Pickle. So like, okay, Oscars, okay, and then it didn't show up in the eligibility list at the Oscars. Okay, this is gonna be an Emmy play, and then I looked at the Emmy submissions, and An American Pickle wasn't there. Like, oh, so where is it? I couldn't find it. So yeah, this category is it's always interesting because especially now, because before, well, with the Motion Picture Academy, at least, their demarcation of what's theatrical and not is a 7-day theatrical release in Los Angeles. But since that's gone, we saw last season, there were some people like, oh, I think this is good. Like, this is Paul Bettany's best performance in his career. Like, maybe Oscars. And then, oh, Tessa Thompson, best act, maybe. And then, an FYC ad just makes a difference between what's TV and what's film. Okay. So, yeah.
The same thing happened before that with Hugh Jackman and Bad Education.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which even made rounds in some quote unquote film awards, USC and all that. So I just love how oddball this category is. And
I do think that Bad Education, unfortunately, was sort of the death knell of the TV movie, because that was one that was like, oh, it's a TV movie, but it's going to do well. And then it really just did not, which was a shame, whether you like the film or not, just because it's unfortunate to see all these films, again, 41 films, TV movies relegated here. And that's even a place where they make a distinction that Hamilton is not eligible. And we'll talk about that in a second. Not too much, of course, because we've spent too much time talking about Hamilton in our lives, I think. But just, something like Pink Skies Ahead, I saw it at AFI Fest last year, and then it didn't get released enough to be eligible for anything last year, and now it's a TV movie. And I just wonder whether people are actually looking at the ballots and saying, oh, I should check this stuff out, because something like that aired on MTV, I don't think any Emmy voters saw that. I think a wider audience that might have streamed it elsewhere might have, but it's strange to me. Yeah.
Well, I think what's also, say what you will about like how the Emmys define things like comedy, drama, limited series. The lines are all murky, but at least like the goal is to recognize that these are different crafts, and like creating a contained story that spans 7 episodes is different than doing a multicam sitcom, which is different from doing The Crown. And I think this sort of TV movie, which is just like, these are the movies that meet like the right contract negotiations to be in theaters, or just like had a strange business case, go here. It just kind of feels like an offshoot. It keeps giving us Dolly Parton movies as a nominee. wonderful. That's great. I would love to see if they would have pushed Christmas in the Square at the Oscars, have a big FYC billboard. I'm sure it wouldn't. But no, it does just kind of feel like this this fun, goofy little mark on the Emmys that's just like really whatever you say doesn't mean, or your categorizations are just so off because no one cares what a TV movie is versus a movie. The playing field's been leveled for the consumer, but it's not for the industry.
The other thing about that is like that's even true of like the daytime Emmys now. It's just like things are just randomly called daytime shows. I was looking at the nominees for the daytime Emmys and they have just Netflix series. And how is anything on Netflix daytime or prime time?
What time did they release it?
Everything gets released at 3 a.m. Everything's at 3 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah, because like Dash and Lily is considered like a daytime show. And I only watch TV at like 10 p.m. Like, I only ever watch TV at night. So like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that from a perspective of someone who's not online, like my parents, explaining to them why Sound of Metal, which was on Amazon Prime, was competing at the Oscars, but Sylvie's Love, which they saw on the same thing, is a TV movie. And I tried to explain this because of the distribution rights, etc. But then they were bought by the same entity. They're distributing the same thing. I don't understand. Whatever.
Yeah. My mom had the exact same reaction because around December she was watching I'm Your Woman and Sound of Metal and Sylvie's Love and Uncle Frank. So she was seeing the same Amazon logo. Like, oh, these are all good. You know, Oscars? Yeah. This is the season. Like, oh, where are Sylvie's Love? No, they're Emmys. How? Like, I don't know. I'm gonna ask them. What is interesting with what Chris said, what I love is how there are these just some shows that just, I don't know, really blurring the line between comedy and drama. I mean, again, as after just finished A Flight Attendant, there's a very thin line between The Flight Attendant and Killing Eve, and how they're dark and funny, but they are Killing Eve is drama and Flight Attendant is comedy. I love how murky it gets because I think it's the roots of television. Before it was much more easier to delineate what's drama, what's comedy, but now I think the growth of the storytelling that we're seeing, it's much more complex. And again, even the categorization sometimes of what's comedy and drama is just a strategic thing at this point, because you get 1 hour comedies that are dark, but I mean, the episode length of The Flight Attendant is almost the same length as This Is Us. So it's not even the length. I don't even know if it's the tone. Sometimes it's just what feels right, and that's very arbitrary. So I love the mess.
There is something to strategic submission that's not always nefarious. I think something like I'm Your Woman, which I liked at least the performances and the aesthetics, that could have done very well at the Emmys because Rachel Brosnahan is very popular, and there was nothing with the Oscars. I also think that there's something, a show like Generation, which I know that Nathaniel and I feel differently. I don't know that I would consider it a comedy, but I think it's great, and I would like to see that recognized. And then something that we would say it's probably category fraud, and a lot of the readers definitely think, which is Hannah Einbinder in Hacks, but she's fantastic. And with only 5 nominees for Best Actress in a Comedy Series, I don't think there was a way that she was getting in there. And so putting her in supporting doesn't really feel right, because actually she's probably in it more than Jean Smart, if I were to do a count of screen time. But I want her to get nominated. I think she's terrific. So I don't know if there's a level of category fraud or award show fraud that's acceptable if there are people who really are terrific. I'm not sure.
Well, my answer to that is there's never acceptable. The only time I would say it's acceptable is when something is really, really borderline. And there are cases where a supporting performance is large enough that you can start, like, maybe this is a lead, and a lead performance is small enough you're like, maybe this supporting. And in those cases, I never get upset. But Hacks is, everything about it is structured around it being a 2-lead show. Yeah. Like, the entire concept, the entire plot, the entire pilot. Like everything is about it being about two women, you know, sort of colliding and then having to learn to get along. I mean, it's like completely the definition of a two lead show. So that's frustrating to me because I also think she's really terrific in the show, but I personally wouldn't nominate her because she's not in a category where I'd feel comfortable doing it. But I think with comedy and drama, it gets a little trickier and it's a little harder to say what is fraudulent or not, because people have I think most people, when it comes right down to it, if they really talk it out and they've stopped thinking about what performances they love, can agree that a lot of supporting campaigns are actually not supporting characters. But I think people don't fundamentally agree on what is a drama and is a comedy. That's my take on it. Because like I think Generations is a comedy, but I can totally see the read that it's a drama, and people just have different. Like I thought, Get Out. You know, people were all upset that was categorized as a comedy at the Globes, but to me it was satire, which is a form of comedy, much more dramatic form of comedy. But so I totally bought it. But then people got very upset about that categorization. So.
We've also seen category flipping with shows like Shameless and Orange is the New Black and Boston Legal to varying degrees of success. I don't know. I mean, those are three extraordinarily different shows just from one another. But it is interesting to see that. And I've often felt that way about shows like iZombie and other things that are sort of like comic procedurals and other things that just didn't feel right to be considered dramas, but that it's hard to argue that maybe they would be dramas. And all these superhero shows too, that are those dramas, or should those just be comedies, you know, the way that other, you know, fare like that might have been considered in the past.
Well, one of the weirdest categorizations this year for me is Cobra Kai, because that's considered a comedy, right? That's on all the comedy ballots. And it's not like, I mean, it's light, you know, but does light mean that you're a comedy, or does it just mean that you're light? That you're
the Globes. Just like the Globes.
And I think kind of with that, I could almost get behind light being comedy, because I think maybe that scale is more easily compared against comedies rather than like putting that up against like a Syrian drama might accentuate its lightness in a less positive light.
There is also the case of Sex Education, right?
Yeah.
It's categorized as a drama, which I cannot understand. And even just recently at the BAFTAs, it won prizes as a comedy.
Yeah. And with performances, like, I love Joseph Fiennes in The Handmaid's Tale, but I know the reason why he's in lead. It's not because of the screen time or the performance in the fourth season. It's really just strategy to make way for some of the other supporting actors. And I think the lead actor drama series is kind of open-ish. So that's why they put him there. But I only understood it until the finale. The whole season didn't support that argument. Like, oh, he's in lead. Okay, I'm not saying it. But, okay.
It's always interesting to me to see people who switch categories year to year. That used to happen a little bit with Mad Men, and that certainly happened with The Handmaid's Tale, switching between guests and supporting each year. It's an interesting idea because it does speak to what's actually happening. The Crown, the same thing with Josh O'Connor and Tobias Menzies flipping. And those, to me, are two people who should have been nominated absolutely last year, and now they're getting all the attention this year, but I think they had much richer material overall. But there's also another show that doesn't really fit any category, and that's Saturday Night Live, which is a network player, the only network player that like consistently has done pretty well. And that, at least in some of our predictions, we're expecting to hog an undue, in many ways, proportion of the slots in supporting actor and supporting actress. And while in a sense the supporting actor or supporting actress categorization makes sense, because as far as the ensemble goes, that's what they are. There used to be this individual performance in a variety program category that might have been better suited. But I think that as much as we're thinking Ted Lasso could sweep all this stuff, we could also get 3 or 4 Saturday Night Live nominees in each of those categories. I know that I only watch Saturday Night Live every year after the nominations come out to watch the specific episodes that have submissions that were nominated. But what does everyone else feel about this? Do we have any SNL fans in the crowd?
I watch it every week on a Sunday night because it's the time I can get it here. Well, I think we've discussed this last year. I'm really interested in how they decided upon mixing Saturday Night Live with the other shows, because I think it's a different kind of skill set. It's a different kind of environment, but it's comedy as well. And in this year, I think it's really gonna do well, not just in the supporting, but in the guest categories. I could just see them getting, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, whatever, 5 of the slots there. And I don't know what to feel about it, because when I started following the Emmys, it's already happened. I'm like, okay, I think this is the game. Okay, sure. Fine. Yeah. But I love the show.
I mean, I watch the skits that go viral, basically, and that's the extent of how I feel about the show. I mean, I would be very happy if Bowen Yang was nominated this year, because so many of his skits went viral and they're so funny. But I also think it's just weird that they're in that category. And then sometimes somebody from SNL will be in a show, like Adie Bryant, for example, and she's so good on Shrill, but there's just been no buzz.
Yeah.
So it's just, and yet, one, you're having to do a full character, and the other, the whole point is that you do these little snippets that are more like impressions or caricatures on purpose. It's not that it's bad, it's just a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Right. And a category we don't cover on the site, Variety Sketch Series, will only have 2 nominations this year because they only had 9 submissions, which begs the question, how are there more TV movies on the air than Variety Sketch Series, and that many more? But also, I mean, I guess there's something to that. It's always interesting to me because in any given year, any award show, there are so many deserving people and programs and movies, and that's why I don't like the fact the Oscars, for instance, were fluctuating the number of things. That if you're going to say there's 10 best movies, these are the 10 best movies. Don't say only 6 movies were good enough for us to do. And I mean, the Emmys have been doing this for years, though. The fact that we have anything more than 5 nominees regularly, it's just a little maddening. But there's something nice, I think, about having it where it is proportional, even if it's, you really have to have an advanced math degree to try to figure out how everything got worked out, or a handy-dandy cheat sheet on that part. So is there, we've talked about this a little bit, but is there one show or performance that getting in would really just make your day when nominations are announced?
Elizabeth Moss and The Handmaid's Tale. Done.
Which shouldn't be something you have to hope for, right? But after last year.
Yeah, I'm pissed off still last year, but everyone from The Handmaid's Tale.
I mean, I have so many that I root for and that just don't, that I end up, this year, well, this is never going to happen, but I think Justice Smith and Martha Plimpton are both incredible on Generations. And that would just make my day. I can't imagine it happening, but they're both so funny and so interesting and nuanced. So that would be something that would really thrill me. And on the other, the more lightweight type of comedy, I would say with Cobra Kai, I feel about that show probably the way that people who voted for Mandalorian felt about it. I don't think people are sitting out there this is great drama, but they just love it, so they vote for it. I don't think Cobra Kai is necessarily a great show, but it's just so enjoyable. I'm sure you all, I guess you would call them a guilty pleasure. I would be happy if Cobra Kai got something. I mean, William Zabka, I think, is great in the leading role, which shocked me. When I heard that they were making that show, I said, that sounds terrible. Why would you revisit that? And I just have been very surprised by him and by the show. I think it's really fun. Did I lose all my credibility as a critic to enjoy Cobra Kai that much?
Not at all. Well, I can't say I've never seen it, but I don't think so.
I have bad taste, so. All right.
Yeah. Of you have guilty pleasures where you think, I'm not sure that I can get behind the fact that I'm rooting for it this hard, but anybody else?
Oh, I mean, like season 1 of High School Musical, the musical, the series, I think it's a legitimately great show. And we all should have really taken notice and taken it seriously. And it's spawned Olivia Rodrigo, so you know who's laughing now.
Right.
But I think too, like in terms of just sort of the nostalgia IP that's back, I'm really surprised that Saved by the Bell hasn't made more of a splash. I thought it was incredibly terrific. I think Josie Tota's wonderful on the show. I think the entire cast is great. And I think they just have a lot of fun with what could be a guilty pleasure premise. And I'm who's to say like what's the point in which a guilty pleasure becomes like actually good? But I think self-awareness is a really, really special skill that not every show has. And I think being aware, being in on the joke of your own premise is really, really helpful, especially in comedy, and it's rarely used.
Yeah, and it's very endearing too. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's well said.
I'm gonna add the actors from I May Destroy You. I mean, Michaela Cole is, I think it's best chance, but best actress in a limited series. It's like, and also the supporting players. I know Ted Lasso is gonna have a good day, but I would really be happy to see Juno Temple get in. I know Rebecca is getting all the buzz. She's the front runner now, but Juno Temple adds so much joy that I felt in Ted Lasso. I don't know why I held it off for almost a year. And she's a big part of why I enjoy Ted Lasso so much. And of course, the show is enjoyable as a whole. So yeah, and because I don't think she's had really much of an awards presence since her since her career. She's young, but she's had a wonderful career. But I really would be appreciative. Oh, she's the actress that we've been seeing for so long, and it's gonna be like nomination. I love her in Ted Lasso.
I do
I
too.
love her.
I think she's great in the show. And speaking of self-aware, that's a great example of a character and an actor understanding a character and understanding why it reflects so well on them and why they're perfect for the part.
Yeah.
Because her career has been kind of like that girl.
Yeah.
And then the character gives her an opportunity to say, I'm more than just this. You know,
Yeah.
so I love her in that show. I think she's good person. I think we'll get a 2 for in that category.
I hope.
I agree, but also in that category, I love Caitlin Olsen so much in Hacks, and I think having Hannah Einbender in supporting actress really takes the sails out of what's such a fun performance from someone who's been doing great work on It's Always Sunny for like over a decade, hasn't gotten recognized, and I think she brings just like the right amount of like pathos to this role that really could have just been a one-note joke. And I would just love to see her recognized, not just for that, but kind of just for how long she's been on our TV sets doing great comedy. The other one, which it's a twofer, and one of these is probably going to get in, and one is on the bubble, but I think will. We've had 2 female directors who have done amazing work in high-profile TV shows. So I think Marielle Heller is going to be getting in for The Queen's Gambit, deservedly so. Tranquility is replenished. But I would also love for Emerald Fennell to get in for The Crown.
You mean for acting or for directing episodes?
Oh, for acting. I think it's Camilla. Yeah, she is just really great, and I think rounds out the cast really well.
Claudia, what about you?
One nomination that would make me really happy, but I don't think will happen, is Sean Parks for Mangrove, for Small X Mangrove. I thought he gave one of the best performances of 2020, independently of Medium. And I got a little bit sad watching the precursors and seeing only John Boyega getting recognition out of those 5 amazing casts. So yeah, it's not a very demonstrative performance. I think its best moment is a silent reaction to a judgment. but I think it's really masterful performance. If you consider Mangrove a film last year, I would certainly nominate him for Best Actor. And I would just love it if he got some recognition this year, because he seems to have been pretty much ignored even by people who praise Small Axe anthology. On a more general sense, I would like to see It's a Sin get something. Anything. I'm not as high on the show as some people are. I think there are some parts that don't work, some roles and some performances that I'm not particularly fond of, but there are some parts that really do work. And I'd just love to see something, anything, which seems a bit difficult considering how crowded the limited series categories are this year, especially with Mare of Easttown and The Queen's Gambit pulling so much focus. I'm expecting disappointment, let's say that.
You know, for me, it's always about just shows that are clearly popular with Emmy voters, but then don't get the right actors nominated. And somebody go back to The Office and John Krasinski, who was never nominated, or Nick Offerman for Parks and Rec, all these things. But when we're talking about Ted Lasso, which again, I think is universally beloved, I think Nick Mohammed would be a wonderful choice. I actually got to know him, I think it was about a month before Ted Lasso premiered, watching Intelligence, which he created on Peacock. And so it's nice to see him in a role that's just so endearing. And so I think he is probably third or fourth in line from that show to get a nomination. But I'd really love to see him get in. I think Pose is another one that would be really great to see across the board show up a lot, and I'm not expecting it. And lastly, I would say Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which is one that we covered, and as we were writing these posts, it got canceled. And so I think early on, we're like, Zoe's going to do great. And then I think, Chris, by the time you got around to one, you're like, well, it got canceled. So and then now it's down to 5 slots in that category. So in a sense, it's a very easy show to categorize. It's a musical, but there aren't a lot of musicals. And historically, stuff like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend didn't actually do very well aside from the song categories. And so I don't know what to expect. I think Alex Newell is actually probably the best shot for the show. But Jane Levy is really wonderful. And it would be really nice. She's also been, I remember her in the first season of Shameless, back before she left that show to do Suburgatory, way, way back when, a different career path that could have happened for her if she had stayed there. Not that, and that's another thing, honestly. Shameless is a show that I've enjoyed for 11 years. Yes, William H. Macy is good, but everyone else in the cast is so good. And these actors who started when they were 10 or 12 or whatever, and they're still so good now in their 20s, it would be so great. But I think Jeremy Allen White would probably have the best shot, but if he couldn't get nominated for Homecoming for that pineapple episode, I don't know what he would be able to get in for. And so that would be a dark horse. The same way I'd say about Search Party, which is a show that I think season 3 was really, really great. I think season 4 was very dark and possibly too off-putting to people, but it's really interesting to see that happens so rarely that there's a show that has 2 seasons eligible within the same season. I don't think it would have any better shot if it was just season 3, but it would be really nice if for some reason that could show up somewhere.
I think one of the issues with Shameless is when you're on that long, you get taken for granted. And I think that show in particular might have, because of what you're saying, the growth of the young cast, I don't watch it anymore, but from the time periods when I watched it, I could see that happening, and it was kind of amazing that they turned out to be such good actors. And I think had that show taken a few years off, like a lot of famous dramas did, and come back, I think people might have been like, wow, this is really evolved. But for whatever reason, they only viewed that show through the prism of William H. Macy and Joan Cusack as a guest, even though she was on every episode. So, yeah. One person I wanted to mention that we didn't mention at all that I would be thrilled, I think it could happen, but very not for sure, is Wunmi Masaku from Lovecraft Country, who I think is the best in show, on a very good show. And I think it's a really tricky performance, and I think she's just excellent and riveting. I would be really happy to see her in supporting actress.
Absolutely. And I hope that when we talk again after nominations come out, we will be pleasantly surprised that almost all the people that we said should get in, because we're nominated, voting is closed. We're not going to influence anyone now, but we want, this is what we're feeling. And I think I'm hoping, I mean, I'm always hopeful. I'm always much more excited before nominations come out. But I think that there is some hope this year in the fact that the ballots just look so different that people have to look at them. That they can't just say, here are all the shows I like. They're like, oh, there's The Crown. And then, oh, that's it. There's nothing else. I have to flip through and see what's really there. And again, maybe I have too much faith in Emmy voters, but I'd like to think I'm an optimist, and maybe we'll get to do some good stuff.
Yeah, I do have a question. Well, how do you guys feel about how would the Underground Railroad perform? Because I could see it going both ways. I don't know. You guys watched it. I don't know.
It's a grueling watch. It's very good, but I was trying to sort of marathon it, and that's not a good idea. Like it is very tough, and there's a 19-minute episode in there at one point, and it's a strange thing in that sense. But I think it needed to. I don't know. I don't know what it did wrong, but I think that it doesn't have the buzz of The Queen's Gambit or Mayor of Easttown or even WandaVision. And it sort of needs that going in, and maybe it will surprise us, but I just don't know.
It might have been one of those shows that's a lot to handle sort of being released right before, whereas the right before position is really great for things that are instantly accessible, that are also high quality, because then you can just have all the buzz and everybody's talking about you. But for things that require people to invest more, releasing right before a deadline, I think is tougher. I find that all the time with the Oscars too, like things that are really heavy or really tricky to understand. It might be better to release them a few months before December instead of like December 28th or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one question I wanted to ask you guys is, like, I was thinking about Love, Victor. Now, I don't expect it to show up anywhere, but it's one of these interesting cases where the second season premiered right after the eligibility period ended. So technically the season that's eligible is not the season that everybody is watching and talking about. And I thought season 2 was so much better than season 1 that I'm wondering if it could have reflective glory backwards, or if it's way too long of a shot, or if you think that any other shows are having that thing where what people are talking about right now that's not technically eligible will help them.
Well, that should help Wumi Masako, that she's on Loki, and that's a high-profile role. And so even though it's a very different part, and maybe if we were really being optimistic, same thing with Generation, which is currently airing the back half of its season that's not eligible, and it has the other one. I think that definitely could. I think it's always strange. The fact that Ted Lasso is the front runner and it aired so long ago is very, very interesting. But I don't always think that shows are nominated for the right seasons. There were a handful of shows that I could mention that got better as they went on and were only nominated at the beginning. And once they had gotten really good, Emmy voters forgot about them. The Shield, which I always thought was great, that's one that just continued to be excellent the whole time, and at a certain point it was just dismissed. Damage is another example that I really didn't like it at the start, and as it got better, it was completely ignored. So I think that there definitely is not a lot of attention paid. I think it was the Producers Guild of America that nominated Curb Your Enthusiasm one year that it wasn't on, and they had to withdraw the nomination because it didn't air. So I don't think that did happen with the Emmys, only with Peter McNichol, where they miscategorized him and he was in too many episodes. But there's plenty of room for error. I don't think anyone's paying as close attention as we are necessarily.
Yeah. I think to that point, though, the people on the ballot don't exist in a vacuum, and I don't think people are laser focused on what did they specifically do this season. I mean, I think that's a huge reason why Melissa McCarthy won for Mike and Molly. It's because of being in Bridesmaids the same year. I think buzz and excitement are not things you can manufacture in a lab. Like, you either kind of have it or don't have it. I think for Love, Victor in particular, because I agree, Nathaniel, I think season 2 is so much better than season 1, and I liked season 1. But I think specifically what it could get traction for in season 2, or what people are talking about, is Ana Ortiz's performance, which is so good. And I feel like that'd be hard to retroactively get for season 1 unless people just really aren't thinking or really just take in with season 2. But expect next year to be having this call, and I'm saying, please, let's nominate Ana Ortiz.
Yeah, because I personally wouldn't put her on the ballot for this year, but she just blew me away in this right now in the new season. I was like, wow, the show is like miles better than it used to be. Yeah, but that does happen, and that's also why we see so much repeating of the Emmys. Like people, and it's true of all of us. Like we latch onto a show and we love it, and we might after the fact say, yeah, that season wasn't as great as the others, but maybe when we were doing our ballots, we would have also been like, it's my favorite show. Deserves everything.
Look at Game of Thrones.
Right. Yeah, because there's a lot. Most series are uneven because that's really hard to maintain. Good quality, great quality, bad quality. It's really hard to have the exact same level of quality over hours and hours and hours of a show.
I know the feeling.
I think it also just matters on if people are still watching. Like a show can get better, but if people like found other things to love in the time span that they weren't on, then and they drop off of a show, they don't know that it's gotten better and it loses those votes. I think keeping your audience engaged and coming back to you is it's hard to do, and I think that's why Game of Thrones can get worse over its last couple seasons but get more nominations, because it ingrained itself in the culture and people kept watching. And so when you're going through the ballots, you remember watching Game of Thrones.
That's why I'm a bit nervous about The Handmaid's Tale, because it took almost like a 2-year break. So I don't know if it's gonna help that it's getting great reviews for a show that took a break for almost 2 years, or like have people moved on already.
Well, next year that's going to be a big thing because every show will have taken a break for 2 years. And so it's, I don't know, that's always interesting to me how things sort of come back much stronger. And then you have cases like Fleabag, where season 1 was great. And I watched season 1 back when it was on, but then season 2 just, came out really, really strong. And all of a sudden, was noticed. And so it's interesting to see when that happens. And I also think those who like Schitt's Creek more than I do would also probably not argue that season 6 was his best season, but it was the season that got noticed. And there's something nice about performers getting honored, even if they're not doing their best work. And I'm not trash talking Schitt's Creek. I'm just saying that I don't want to, be banned from the site like some readers requested. But no, I think that there's still something nice about seeing people and rooting for people you like, even if they're not doing their absolute finest work. And I think, Carlos, you can relate to that with The Handmaid's Tale, that even if certain things aren't as fantastic, you love the show unconditionally. You love the show unconditionally.
I do have 5 seats for saying, okay, I'm gonna campaign. Okay, sure. Love the show. I mean, that's the thing with that's the fascinating thing with television. Sometimes it's not the best. It's not its best self, but then you still fall in love with it, and you're like, oh, this is a show I love. And
well, or you have cases like my thing with that was Mad Men, and like everybody, it was nominated for all of its seasons, but everybody sort of moved on halfway through in terms of wanting it to win things. And for me, like that was a show that even in its worst seasons were better than anything else on television. So I was just like, yeah, it wasn't that great of a season, but it's still better than everything else I watched. So,
and how did it only win 1 acting Emmy over the entire course of its run?
Oh my gosh.
Don't remind us.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just insane. And yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is love based, which is why things do so well.
Well, let's reconvene after we're all thrilled about the nominations, and hopefully some of our wishes will come true.
My prayer circles didn't work last year for The Handmaid's Tale. I only got 10.
I'm actually like wondering if we're gonna have something really weird this year, like all 6 nominations in a supporting category from the same show.
Saturday Night
Live. I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, when they love something, they love it.
Well, so let's make that our final question. If one show got all the nominations in one category, what would that one show be?
Hopefully, or predicting?
You can interpret as you wish.
I would say it's supporting actor because there's so many men who are so funny in that show.
Supporting actress, The Crown.
Oh, yeah.
What? Supporting actress?
The Crown.
Supporting actress, The Handmaid's Tale.
Surprise, surprise.
So out of character. Oh, guest actress, actually. Sorry.
I would say supporting actress for Saturday Night Live. I think whenever they run out of things to do, they go through. Actually, no, even more realistic, I think guest actor Saturday Night Live. I think they can fill the guest categories just with SNL hosts.
Those categories are the worst. Looking over, like, a lot of, we talk about supporting lead strategies. Those categories are only vanity plays for celebrities now. Like,
That's why I love
they're not submitting their guest stars. They're only submitting famous people who do cameos.
Yeah.
Like Robert De Niro and Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
That's why I loved covering it last year. Like, okay, these people are getting nominated. I'm gonna have to review it, I'm sure.
Very, very frustrating to look at those ballots. I didn't see like any like random small performance I saw on a show wasn't even submitted that I was like hoping to see on the ballot so that I could say, oh, you should vote for this person.
Yeah. So I don't know if it has, I don't think it has quite enough to fill the category, but I would love to see the Queen's Gambit dominate Best Supporting Actor. Because I think there are a lot of really great men on that show, and I think Bill Camp has a good shot, but I don't think anybody else does. And that would be nice. It's not going to happen, but it would be nice.
I could see Thomas Brody Sangster. Am I getting his name right?
Sangster, I think, yeah.
I think I could see that as like a dark horse possibility. You know what I could also see is if we see people just writing down one show for everything. Well, Mare of Easttown obviously could be all over every limited series, like, acting category, and Queen's Gambit could be all over supporting actress, actually, if they're just putting down one show, because it's not just Meryl Heller that's submitted. There's also
Isla Johnston, who plays the younger version of her in the first 2 episodes. She's terrific. Yeah. And I mean, if you have people who don't watch the whole full things, I don't know what the cross section of people who don't watch full episodes or full seasons, but then take the time to recognize performers on their ballots. I don't think that exists. But the same thing with Underground Railroad, that there are certain actors like William Jackson Harper who don't appear till the very end, or close to the very end. And so if you only watch part of it, you're like, was this person in it? But again, I don't think people think that hard, if they'd recognize a name they like.
A name they like on another show, perhaps, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other closing thoughts? Anyone thinking anything aside from what we've discussed?
I'm going to think of a million things after we sign off that I'm like, oh, I should have mentioned this show that I love so much.
I'm sure we'll get some questions from our readers too, who will be able to tell us what they think about the shows we love and the shows we don't like and what's really going to happen.
Absolutely. We'll see you all in the comments.
I'm just excited for the costume categories, as always. Costume nerds through and through.
Yeah. I'm excited for the credit category as well.
The flight attendant has great credits.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to picture editing. I don't know. And I don't know. Let's see. Praise be.
I can't wait to see what one other sketch show is going to show up against SNL in a head-to-head battle.
Oh yeah, which will it be?
Or what if SNL gets snubbed and then gets nominated for 6 supporting actors or supporting actresses?
Oh wow, one can dream.
I survived the Elon Musk episode. We're good.
Why did you watch that?
Because I'm a fan of SNL since the 2016-17 season, and I've watched every single thing. Like, why am I doing this? But I love the show.
All I care about is Bowen Yang getting nominated so we can have clips of the iceberg.
Yeah. And Cicely Tyson, I know there are rumors that it's going to be like her final season on SNL, but the season finale of the Saturday Night Live just gave her that showcase as Janine Pirro. Love her. I want her. I want her in.
I thought you said Cicely.
Yeah, I did too. I was like,
Cicely Strong. Oh my gosh, I messed up. I'm so sorry. Rest in peace, Queen. I'm so sorry. I'm just.
Anyone watching this point should be very confused about what we're talking about.
I mean, rest in peace, but I would have loved to see what Cicely Tyson would have done on SNL. That would have been an episode I would have tuned in on.
So sad means just Cicely Tyson. I messed up. Sorry. Don't trust me with anything about the Emmys.
I think that's a great and very weird note to end on. But
my
thank you,
mistake.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And let's do it again in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.